Good evening, everyone. My name is Marvin Rotrand. I am the Director General of United Against Hate Canada. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à cet appel. Mon nom est Marvin Rotrand. Je suis le Directeur Général de Unis contre la haine Canada. This evening, we're presenting a town hall with candidate Frank Baylis, who has put his nomination in for the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. Tonight's meeting, I wish to stress, is a town hall. It is not an endorsement. United Against Hate Canada attempts to inform Canadians for every election, provincial, federal, leadership contests, as well as to the positions of the parties and the candidates. What we do generally is provide a survey or a questionnaire, and we circulate that. I want to stress that recently our work led to certain policy changes in British Columbia and in Saskatchewan when all major parties responded to us on issues dealing with discrimination and hate. This meeting is open to the public. You do not have to be a Liberal member or supporter to be on the call. We've made the same offer to all campaigns of all the candidates of the Liberal Party. We have, in the past weeks, distributed to our extensive email list information that's been given to us by the various campaigns, including their websites, their Facebook pages, how to access it, and any other information that has been sent to us. We wish good luck to all the candidates on March the 9th, and we want members to have make an informed choice based on the information the candidates put out there. But moreover, we want Canadians to know who their next prime minister is going to be, whether they support that person or not. The goal of this evening is to learn a little bit more about Frank Baylis. For those in the Montreal region, he's quite well known as a former member of Parliament for Dollard-Pierrefonds and as an active member of a number of community groups. We'll allow Mr. Baylis's introducer to give more information about him, and we'll give Frank 10 minutes to tell us what his priorities are. Later this evening, there are going to be a number of questions from United Against Hate Canada. And finally, we're going to have questions from the audience. The call will be about 1 hour duration. J'aimerais dire que, effectivement, les gens peuvent poser des questions dans la langue de leur choix. People can ask questions in the language of their choice. There will be no translation. Il n'y a pas de traduction qui est fournie par Unis contre la haine Canada. Mais j'invite les gens, quand on arrive aux périodes de questions, de signaler s'ils ont une question. I'm going to ask people, when we get to the question period, to raise hands to show that they have a question. So without further ado, we're going to go to the person designated by Frank Baylis to introduce him, and that's Bhagwani Sandhu. Bhagwani, could you take the floor and introduce Frank Baylis?
Thank you very much, Marvin. Ça me fait grand plaisir de vous rencontrer encore une fois. Et ça m'est encore un grand plaisir de présenter à tout le monde Frank Baylis. C'est plus que 40 ans des années que je connais bien Frank quand on est jeune, mais je vais parler principalement en anglais, s'il vous plaît. So we're 40 plus years that I've known Frank, and in my early engagement when we were young boys, most of our work was around anti-racism, anti-Black racism, and mostly around anti-Semitism. I come from a social justice background, and Frank comes from his mother being Black and also his mother's side having Jewish roots. And I could just share one quick story. It was in the I think it was 1990s or something, 95, maybe 96. I was living in Victoria, and Frank had come for a Liberal Party meeting there. And I remember we were walking on the Inner Harbor, and I said to him, hey, look at that guy with a hard hat. And he said, oh yeah, look at him. And it was Ernst Zundel. And so we chased him around. We would catch up, and he'd disappear, catch up. And this lasted for a good half an hour. But that was just kind of, young guys with a lot of hot blood wanting to kind of, fight in our way, anti-Semitism at that time. Subsequently, we grew up, matured up, and did things slightly differently. And Ernst Zundel was a Holocaust denier, and he was actually shipped out of Canada, if people remember. I think it was in the early 2000s. But subsequently, when Frank got elected, we reconnected. I moved to Ottawa, reconnected, and he did the first stood up for Islamophobia. If you remember the petition that he signed as a member of parliament, that he launched, e-petition. It had the highest number of signatures, and that was a time that was rife with Islamophobia, when the opposition parties were going on about barbaric cultural practices, so on and so forth. Well, subsequently, as we all know, he became a co-chair after politics of the No à la Loi 21, which refused in Quebec the right of religious practicing people, Jewish, Muslims, and Sikhs, to wear turbans or kippas and hijabs. He actually raised money for that effort as well. So it's been a pleasure to know him in that context. And what people don't know is that beyond that as well, it was only a few months ago that Frank was one of the keynote speakers at Parliament Hill when the Dalit community, these are the people who are being discriminated because of caste system in India, held an event for Dr. Ambedkar, who's one of the leaders of that community. And Frank was a keynote speaker to it. And most people are surprised that, what the heck is Frank doing here? Well, it turned out that Frank and me, we knew one of the community leaders in Canada, again, when we were young guys, fighting racism and injustice and so forth. Subsequently, he's gone on to other things, and now, obviously, he's running for Liberal Party leadership. And I must say that it's been a sheer pleasure to be a comrade who's been in the trenches. It isn't just rhetoric. It isn't just sort of empty talk when it comes to no to hate. It's actually, he's proven it both with his actions, his words, and with his pocket. So it's a great pleasure to introduce him to the rest of the audience. I think you'll find him to be an affable person. He's thoughtful, in my view. And I think should he become the leader of the federal Liberal Party, that I think we can see a lot more of this work continue to the point that maybe one day we can all just say that, you know what, we got rid of hate in Canada. So that's what my hope is for Frank. That's what all of our hope should be for him. And I'm certainly behind him to support him. So I hope all the rest of your listeners are able to do that. And they can find that out when he starts talking. I'm sure you'll be convinced as I am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sandhu. We understand that you have a 40-year acquaintance with Mr. Baylis, so you're an excellent person to introduce him. I want to inform the audience that the video for tonight will be shared with the Baylis campaign, and they've been informed they can use what they like from this evening as part of their outreach to Canadians. We'll now go to Mr. Baylis. Mr. Baylis, vous avez vers 10 minutes. We're not firm on the time. You have about 10 minutes to address the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your priorities, why you're running, and what you hope to accomplish. Frank Baylis, the floor is yours.
Merci, M. Mortan. Je vais vous dire que je suis très content que vous m'avez invité pour faire partie de cette conférence. So I'm very grateful for being invited to be part of this conference. And just as a little aside, I have to give a shout out to Marvin Rotran and the work that he's done. He's really kind of the godfather of fighting for all people's rights. So I've learned a lot from Marvin, and he's unstoppable and doesn't seem to ever want to slow down in the work he's doing. So I congratulate you, Marvin, for that. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to people. So simple question, what am I running? What do I like? What is my objective as running in that? I really have three things I want to do. Three things that I think will make our country much better. The first one is the obvious one we're all struggling with today, which is the affordability crisis. So housing, rents, grocery bills have all shot up. And added to that, we're feeling a lot of pressure financially to make ends meet. So I come from a business background, and I've worked with my partner, who you'll meet later on. And we've always been able to set goals, achieve them, and do it within a fiscally responsible way. So what do we need to do to get out of this situation we find ourselves in financially? We need to create great jobs. We need to really invest in Canadian technology, Canadian know-how, Canadian universities, and with that, create the jobs that will help us build our economy. So I'm not someone that believes in giving tens of billions of dollars to a car battery manufacturer to try and lure them to Canada, create 500 or 600 jobs. I'm much more involved and much more interested in just taking our money and investing in Canadians. I want to invest in us. I want to invest in Canadian universities. Right now, we're squeezing our universities, and this is a very, very foolish thing we're doing because they're the foundation upon which you build an advanced economy. So the last thing you want to do is be squeezing your universities and making it hard for them to educate our young people. So I really want to address that as the first step. And then from there, in my role as a business person, mentor, as an investor, I'm constantly invited to meet new companies, startup companies, growing companies, and I'm always so impressed. I'm so impressed with the amazing technology that exists right here in Canada. And I know that if we just believe in ourselves, we invest in ourselves, we will make the great companies that we need and have the great advances that will make us leaders in the world economically. So that's one of the things I really want to emphasize is I need us to believe in ourselves. I believe in Canadians 100%, and I want to invest in Canadians. Added to that, we do need to get the fiscal house in order in Ottawa. Why? Because what happens is the more we overspend, the more our dollar drops in value. And the more the dollar goes down in value, the more the prices at the grocery store go up. So you can see a lot of the political class will invite the grocery store owners to Ottawa and they'll start berating them and yelling at them and telling them they're bad people. But the reality is, if we want an orange, you have to buy it from Florida in US dollars. And when you bring it up to Canada and convert to Canadian dollars, the lower our dollar is, the higher the price of the orange. So to get things more affordable again, we really need to get our fiscal house in order. And that's something that I've been able to do throughout my career. So I think those two approaches, let's invest in ourselves, let's believe in ourselves, and let's get our fiscal house in order. That's how we'll put more money in your pockets, but at the same time, bring the prices down. So I want to bring that kind of approach to Ottawa. That's the number one thing I want to do. The second thing, and this is an aspirational one, but we absolutely can do it. And I know when I say this, some people smile or they think I'm stretching it, but we can have in Canada, and we will have in Canada, the best healthcare system in the world. I repeat that because it's really important. We can and we will have the best healthcare system in the world. Yes, today we have a lot of pressures on our system. It's not working the way we want it to do that, and that's okay. I understand how we got here, and I know the steps to get us to where we want to be. I have spent 40 years in healthcare. So I've dealt with doctors and nurses and technicians. I've dealt with hospital administrators. I've dealt with policymakers, and I've dealt with government agencies. So I have the big picture view. And what's happened to our system is simple. It was designed in the 1960s for what we call acute care. So when you got hit by a car, our system, you'd be rushed to the emergency room, we'd fix you up and send you out. But as the population has aged, the needs have changed. Now we need a chronic care system. So this is one system that helps people get through they have diabetes, but we need to help them through that process as they live with diabetes, or they live with a cancer, or they live with a heart disease. So we're using the wrong tool. It's a bit like this analogy I say, we had a nail before and we used a hammer, but now we have to use a screwdriver, except we're not using a screwdriver. All we say is, can you get a bigger hammer? Can you really whack that screw? And that's not the approach we need to take. We need to say, okay, we need to have the right tools for the right challenges. And what are they? I'll tell you. Right now, we have approximately 6 million Canadians that don't even have access to a primary care physician. So there's only two doors to come into the system, the healthcare system. You have a doctor, or if not, we all know where you're sent to go. You're all told to go to the emergency room. And when you get there, we all know what's going to happen. You're going to wait, you're going to wait, and you're going to wait. And it's not because the emergency rooms are too small. No, we're not using them for what they were designed for. So I want to open two more doors. So there's 4 doors now that you can go into the system. The first door we're going to open is the pharmacists. Now, pharmacists are trained to have a lot of experience, a lot of capabilities. And we call them, what they're allowed to do is called the scope of practice. I'm trained to do this much, but the rules only allow me to do this much. Well, we just got to open that door and let the pharmacists do what they're trained to. So if you have a need for a certain prescription, do I need you to go to the emergency room for that prescription or get to see your doctor? Your local pharmacist can diagnose you for a number of diseases, can refill your prescriptions, follow you, and do all that. So we need to open that door. They're there, and we just need to let them do the job that they're trained to do. The second door I want to open is what I call a continuous care center. And this will be staffed by nurse practitioners with a few doctors to support them. Now, there's nurses that are trained at this level. Doctors are trained here. Nurse practitioners are trained quite close to a doctor. We would need 6,000 nurse practitioners to be trained and put to work in Canada. And if they looked after just 1,000 patients a year, which is much less than what a doctor looks after, which is normally a doctor is about 1,500, 6,000 nurses, each looking after 1,000 patients, is 6 million Canadians now have treatment. So imagine that if you need to see someone and you can't see your doctor right away, you can just contact the local continuous care center, book an appointment, go in and see them. They'll have all your data, all your files will be on record. The government will control all this, and they'll be able to treat you right away. And I will use all the technologies that I know exist, and there's amazing technologies all developed here in Canada. Put all those to work so that we will then have the best system in the world. And you will not have to wait, and it will not cost more. It'll actually cost less. This is the vision I have, and it'll take 5 or 6 years because we have to train these nurses. Now, presently we have 450,000 nurses in Canada. So we just need to identify 6,000 or so that want to be trained and become nurse practitioners. And I know many of them would like to do that. And we support them and help them do that. And then they slowly come into the system. So it won't be overnight, but in a few years, if we do this right, we will have the best healthcare system in the world. It'll do much better for us, and it'll cost less. And we'll use new technologies that will allow us to predict your needs, as opposed to right now, what we always do is just wait till you're sick and then bring you in. So I've seen all these technologies. I've helped companies that are developing them, and I'm just eager to put them to work. And I might tell you, all developed here in Canada. So that's number 2. Now, the third thing I want to do, keep in mind, I am trained as an engineer. So I want to go to Ottawa and get things running smoothly. I want to modernize the way we run the government by bringing in the modern techniques, the modern processes, modern technology. I want to do it for the bureaucracy, and I even want to do it for the way we make laws. There's so much work to be done there. We can do it so much better and make the weight of your citizens trying to work with the federal government so much easier. That's getting into a bit of the weeds, but I have a number of ideas there what I want to put to work. So those are the 3 things I'm keen on. Getting our economy running and working for everybody, getting us the best healthcare system in the world, and getting the federal government to work efficiently for all Canadians. That's my plan. Now, I do know that I can't leave this without mentioning the word of the president south of the border. Many, many people are very worried, and rightfully so, about all the rhetoric and the attacks on our sovereignty and the rudeness that's coming out of the United States. I just want to let people know that throughout my career, I can't tell you how many hundreds of contracts I've negotiated with Americans. Generally speaking, they're very nice people. They're polite. They're very tough business people, and that many times, but they're good to do business with. Having said that, I have encountered the Trump type before. I have negotiated with these types of people. I'm not new to the game. I know the tricks that he'll play, and I can counter them. So I'd like people to know that when it comes to dealing with Mr. Trump, I'm not happy with the way our government's doing it now. They're making a number of mistakes because they don't know how to deal with a person like that. But having said that, I am ready to take up that challenge, and we can then be very secure in what he can and can't do. And I will not allow him to hurt our economy. I will not allow him to hurt our jobs or our businesses. We may have to have a bit of tightening of our belts for a short while, but we'll get through this together, much like we did with COVID. So I just want people to know that I have that skill set, and I'm not at all shy to dealing with it. I think that's it for me, Marvin. So I'll pass it back.
Thank you, Frank. In terms of tariffs and relations with the U.S., we'll get back into that during the question period. That's one of the questions United Against Hate Canada will pose to you. But before we get there, the next portion of the meeting deals with endorsers, people who have, a certain profile known in the community, who have decided to support your campaign and speak publicly. So we're going to go to those three people now and ask why they're supporting Frank Baylis as the new leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. And we're going to start with Chris Shaw. Mr. Shaw, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marvin. No, first of all, it's my great pleasure and honor to be nominating and endorsing Frank Baylis. I'm a business partner of Frank for the last 43 years. We went to university together and then subsequently became business partners. And the reasons I'm endorsing him is I have always found him to be a person of high integrity, honesty, hardworking, and caring for all people. Having business experience for the last 43 years, he knows how to create jobs, create innovative economy, deal in tough negotiations, and make their organizations and country stronger. Having had experience as an MP, he knows how the government runs and can be an effective leader into that. And I do strongly believe that we need leadership of Frank at this particular time, as we're suffering from deprivation of innovation in Canada. We need to increase our GDP and make the country much stronger, as well as deal with the Trump tariffs and a number of other global issues that are coming. So I think Frank is ideally suited at this particular time to lead Canada and lead Liberal Party of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. As you mentioned, you have a long business association with Mr. Baylis, and I think those who follow the business community are aware of your successes as a partnership. So thank you for being here this evening to introduce and endorse Mr. Baylis. The second person who's been asked by Mr. Baylis to speak is Michael Leclerc. Michael, are you on the call? I didn't see your name in the list. You're probably there somewhere. We've got quite a few people this evening. Michael, would you take the floor, please?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Bienvenue, mesdames et messieurs. Welcome, and thank you again. This endorsement is a big one for Canada, and it's easy for me. And it's easy for me because I've known Frank for about 10 years. I've been able to witness what he does. He's a man of action, and I see what he does and how he transforms people and communities. Just to give you a bit of a background, I've spent time in the private sector. I've spent time working in the federal government, and I'm currently working in the nonprofit community sector in Montreal. I've met Frank mostly in my role in the community sector, and he is an involved, present, caring individual who really wants to make a difference for all community groups. And for instance, I help immigrant families transition to life in Montreal, coming from all sorts of parts of the world. They've been through incredible hardships in many cases, and they're just trying to create new lives. Frank often wants to know how they're doing, what we can do to make things better for them. This is, one of the fine qualities he has. I'd like to say it's rather, I think, timely. I read the Globe and Mail today, and they had an article that basically was titled "Meet the New Liberals, Same as the Old Liberals." And they were focusing mainly on the two candidates that are getting the most press right now, Carney and Freeland. And the danger, and this is not about them, but the danger, I think, for the Liberal Party is being perceived as a party that is not willing to change its ways. And I've heard in this article, and I talked to others in the community, the Liberal Party and the leader of Canada needs to be courageous enough to come up with big ideas. This is a very important time in our existence, and I think Frank is uniquely qualified to be able to do this. And I'll tell you why. And it's been touched on before, He has the ability to see the big picture. He's a big thinker with big ideas, and he's already spoken about some of his big ideas tonight. As I've said earlier, he listens and he cares. So he's not rash. He'll listen to different perspectives and then make considered decisions in a timely way, but he'll make sure that he is informed and does what's best for the country at large. He's with his government experience, he was frustrated by his time and experience, and so he knows what's wrong, and he knows what he needs to do to fix things. And this talks about his ideas for modernizing and bringing the government system up to speed. You know, in Montreal, he's known as a rassembleur. He brings people together. He's got a lot of, it gets back to his caring and his ability to listen, but you need that in a leader. There's too much division going on right now, and that is not the way to lead. Canada needs somebody who can bring people together. That's going to be essential if we want to focus on, for instance, improving trade within our country and among various provinces. He's talked about bringing jobs to Canada and working with different institutions and organizations to create a better economy. Frank and his family has had firsthand experience when it comes to adversity, when it comes to discrimination, when it comes to racism. He knows what that's like. He remembers what his mom went through. He sees it and he asks about it, and he is involved and wants to make a difference in the community that he works in. His business experience is obviously a huge plus. So when you factor in all of the things I've just mentioned, he is the most well-rounded, most equipped, and the best prepared to be able to lead the Liberal Party and this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. We're going to go to the third endorser, who is Miss Joan Lee, who I believe is the current president of the West Island Black Community Association. Miss Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marvin, and good evening, everyone. Frank is a bold and experienced leader who can deliver results. He has a strong political background. He worked across party lines in Parliament for many, many years. He has a proven track record of effective leadership in politics, business, and in the community, which makes him an ideal candidate to lead the Liberal Party. His experience would be critical in navigating the complexity of national governance, policy development, and party unity. Frank offers a clear and compelling vision for Canada's future, addressing issues such as healthcare, which he spoke about before, education, and economic inequality. His vision brings a sense of hope and progress to the party and to Canada. The Liberal Party, like any political party, might face internal divisions or differences in opinions. Frank is someone who can bring different fractions together, fostering unity in the party while building great relationships abroad of support across the country. Frank, to me, embodies the core values of the Liberal Party of Canada, such as social justice, inclusivity, progressive policy reforms. He has served as such a powerful advocate for these principles, making him an effective leader who aligns with the party base, which many of that he has learned from his late mom, Mrs. Baylis. Frank has built strong relationships with key political figures, communities, interest groups, and which gives him the ability to build alliances and garner support needed to succeed as a leader. I have known Frank for many years. He has a history of achieving significant results in his previous roles, whether it's local, provincial, or federal. His track record speaks for itself and demonstrate his capability to lead and deliver on promises. Thank you, Frank, for your deep commitment to making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Lee. Joan, as I know you personally. Before we go to the 3 questions from United Against Hate Canada, something we get a lot is people need to know more about the procedure. Whether you're a member, a supporter, someone who's just a Canadian who's curious, what everyone knows is on March the 9th, there will be a vote to choose the new leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. Mr. Baylis, before I get to the 3 questions, perhaps you can just quickly walk us through the procedure. People are unclear whether it's a preferential rank ballot or some sort of other ballot. Is an absolute majority needed? How is it going to work? Perhaps you can quickly walk us through that, and then we'll get to the questions.
Sure, Marvin. So there's 5 candidates right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Someone may drop off or not. You don't know because in the 17th, there's a last payment that has to be made. So they made that bar to get in very high, and the amount of money that has to be raised to pay that bar may mean that maybe someone doesn't get through or not. But let's assume that all 5 candidates get through. When you vote, you'll be able to put your first choice, your second, third, fourth, and fifth. If you only have 1 or 2, you only can put 1 or 2. You don't have to put all 5. You'll just fill in the choices that you like. That's the normal way. Having said that, the party has not put out the final rules yet. So we're just waiting for all the rules to be finalized. It will be done online. But from what I'm told by my team, because of the new securities they're trying to do, you'll have to sign in and get your accreditation or something like that. So it's going to be a little trickier than normal because they have to do it online. And there's something, I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe it's coming from Canada Post that has certain kinds of control and mechanisms that they're trying out for the first time. But I'll be sharing that, Marvin, as soon as we have the full details on it. But the party has been working diligently to make sure that this online voting cannot be, how do I say, cannot be abused or taken advantage of, or have nefarious people come in and try and distort the process.
All right. Well, thank you for that clarification. Once it's clearer, we'll be alerting our readers, many of whom are just interested without necessarily being Liberal members or even Liberal supporters. We cross the entire spectrum, and we have supporters everywhere and people who are interested in working together. So we'll go to our questions. Mr. Baylis, Frank, you're noted as the economy candidate. Your positions when you came into the race dealt mainly with bread and butter issues, and you've been hammering on that for a number of weeks. Canadians are rightly concerned about the ongoing relationship with our major trade partner, the United States of America, and have been puzzled about the desire of a sitting president to tear up existing binding agreements and impose tariffs that affect Canadian goods and services while raising prices in the United States. It doesn't make sense to a lot of Canadians. Whereas a 25% tax on all Canadian products was supposed to come into effect on February the 3rd, being delayed for 30 days, there is a new tariff on steel and aluminum that's worldwide, but essentially affects Canada more than anyone else, since we're the largest exporter of steel and aluminum to the United States of any country. Canadians are puzzled and are looking for a cogent program. The government of Canada had suggested there would be countervailing measures. There had been talk of diversification and talk about buy Canadian. In this context, you alluded to it initially, but perhaps you can tell us what you would do if on March the 9th, you're the Prime Minister of Canada and there are continuing discussions of tariffs on Canadian products being exported to the United States. What would Frank Baylis do?
Start with the easy questions, do we, Marvin? So what I would tell you, first of all, is this. The threat that he was going to put 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and at the same time 10% tariffs on everything from China, was not something we should have gotten ourselves worked up about. Why? He can certainly do that. And if he were to do that, it would take about 3 or 4 weeks to absolutely destroy his own economy. And he would destroy the stock market value. And Americans care very deeply about their stock market. He would cause great inflation in the United States. And after a period of 4 to 8 weeks, many of the factories would grind to a halt because our interconnectivity of products. So when he said that, I'll be honest with you, because I've dealt with this type of character before, I just thought, okay, whatever. I didn't even think much of it. But Canadians were really taken aback by that. They were really afraid. And then I had to learn, look, they don't have the experience that I have dealing with these kind of characters. So I could understand they took him at his word. It's not something you should do. So I was not expecting that. And in fact, I wrote an article that was published before Donald Trump became president, and I predicted what he would do. And the first thing I said he will attack is steel. It's right in my article, because I'm thinking about what he's up to, not what he's saying and how he's trying to knock us off our game. There's a very clear reason why he's going after steel, and why I said he would go after steel is because they have an overproduction capacity of steel, and they have a big company, one of the biggest companies, Bethlehem.
103 people are
big
online.
trouble.
Sorry,
They were
excuse
in-
me. Can I ask people to stay mute and allow Frank to speak? Thank you.
Yeah, so I was expecting this, and that's exactly what happened. And I predicted it, and I predicted that he'll also look at probably softwood lumber or dairy. There's certain industries that he can afford to put on these tariffs, and they'll take a little while. They're still going to hurt the American economy, but they'll take a little while longer to do it. And what he's trying to do is help some of the American companies that are that have overcapacity of production. If you recall, you may or may not know, but Bethlehem Steel was supposed to be taken over by a Japanese company, and President Biden stopped that about 3 months ago. So this is why I could predict where he was going. Now, how do you deal with him? First thing I would do is not accept him denigrating our country in any way, shape, or form. I would call him out on that. It's not acceptable. And whether we can do something about it or not, but he would know very firmly. Some politicians say he's joking or tried to brush it off. I would not do that. I would call him out very firmly on it and say it's not acceptable. He may or may not change. I don't know. I don't care. But he should know where we stand. The second thing is we are dealing with a bully tactic. We have to accept it. We have to understand it. That means you cannot give an inch. If you give an inch, he's going to take more and more and more. So I would not give an inch on anything. And that means we will have a bit of a trade war, and he will put tariffs on some things, just like he did the last time he was in power. And he'll tariff on our steel. He'll tariff maybe on our wood, and we'll have to put countervailing tariffs on him. Then what we should be doing is we should be connecting with all the other Americans. So United States is our neighbor. United States is our trading partner. We've gone to war as allies with the United States. In sense, overall, the Americans are our friends. They are our friends. Donald Trump is not. And he's not going to become our friend. And we don't need to bother trying to make him our friend. What we need to make him understand as a bully is that if he pushes us, he's going to get pushed back. And once he understands that, like all bullies, he'll go and find someone else to pick on. But we need to be standing firm and hard, and we need to know what industries he's going to try and hurt. And then the government has to swing behind those industries and make sure we support them through this process. That's the way to get through this, and not to worry about it. And we will get through this. We will get through this. We've got through COVID. We've gotten through much worse than that. So Donald Trump is there. And the other thing I would be doing is not responding to every tweet he sends out. We have to run our country, get on with our lives, and he's going to send out every single thing that's ridiculous one day after another, and I would just put it all aside. And I would have Canadians understand that as we move forward.
A sub-question on this topic has come from a couple of people who helped us prepare for the call. A lot of Canadians are calling on their government to diversify trade, that we're too reliant on the United States. And that includes more trade with China, which is not a democracy, but has apparently impressed people with being a stable trade partner, and the European Union. What would Frank Baylis do in this regard to encourage diversification?
Well, I would go back to my own personal experience myself, and you saw my business partner, Chris Shaw, talk about that. When we built our companies up, we traded with around the world. So we do business in the United States, absolutely, but our big trading partners in Japan was a very big market for us. Western Europe was a market. We've traded everywhere in the world. So I know that we can do it. I've seen the technologies that we have. It has to be high technology, or it has to be good resources. And we need to just bite the bullet and start opening up those doorways for our businesses. That's when I talked about, Marvin, when I said we got to invest in ourselves. That's exactly one of the things I was talking about. Let's help our companies take this technology out. I'll give you an example. Look, we talked about $10 billion to this company called Norfolk to come and build a battery plant in Quebec and maybe create 500 jobs. Well, guess what? I was talking to two young French Canadians, and I think they're already up to 100 people. They're making batteries. Their batteries are for hospitals, not for cars, but their challenge is to grow fast enough to meet the European market. So I'm saying, why don't we help this small company out? And very soon there'll be 500 people, and it will only cost us nowhere near what we're going to spend or waste trying to lure someone else coming over. So I see this all the time. I just say, let's invest in ourselves. I believe in Canadian know-how and Canadian technology. I've done it myself, and I know many others are very bright young people that can get this done for us. So that's how we're going to do it.
Thanks, Frank. We're going to go on to the second question. We're hearing a lot from climate change deniers, but most people are aware of climate change and know it's a threat to our planet and our society. And climate change has actually been part of the dialogue in the Liberal Party leadership campaign. Two of the candidates have said that if they become the leader of the Liberal Party, that's Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland, they would make changes in government climate change strategy. In other words, they would abolish the carbon tax, and they would propose a different way of dealing with climate change. What's the Frank Baylis scheme? Because Canadians, remain concerned about climate change, while they remain concerned about ensuring that our economy remains strong, that there are jobs and prosperity, and it's not a one or the other. Canadians believe that you can attack climate change and maintain a clean and vibrant economy. So what would the Frank Baylis proposal be?
So what I would do, Marvin, first of all, and just to point out, how would I say that, Mark Carney is the architect of the carbon tax and Chrystia Freeland is the implementer of it. So there are challenges there at the carbon tax, but we do need to deal with climate change. But I'm glad to see that they're joining me and calling for the changes and that. Now, having said that, what I tell people is this: there was a time where people just threw their garbage everywhere, and we said, look, this is not acceptable. We have to have garbage collection, we have to have dumps, we have to have recycling, and every one of us pays a small tax, part of our city taxes, and our garbage is collected and properly disposed. We don't allow you to pollute our earth. You're not allowed to pollute the earth. Then there was a time that we polluted the water. So if you had a paint manufacturer, you'd set up beside a river, and all the waste you just dump in the river. There was a time when all human waste from the sewage system was just poured into the river, and we said, this is not acceptable. We have to make changes. So we have what we call sewage treatment plants. We have waste treatment plants so that we don't allow people to poison our water. It costs money, so we make that payment, and it's good that we do that so we can have clean drinking water. We can have clean earth. So we're not allowed to pollute the earth. We're not allowed to pollute the water. And now it comes to polluting the air. So I've been to cities where the air quality is so bad you cannot see the sun for days. You never see a blue sky. There's no blue sky. You don't see the sun. You don't see the blue sky. So to say that we need to do something, absolutely. And if we can get clean air, clean water, clean earth, this is good for us. It's good for our children. It's good for the whole world. Now, that means there's going to be some kind of a cost. Having said that, the way the carbon tax was put in place was just shuffling money around. It was not actually saying, let's address the problem. So what I'm going to be proposing is there's going to be a small cost. It's not going to be what people are paying now. We're not going to take money from here and give it to you and do this and that. We're going to just take money that we need and put it to work to clean our air. And when we do that, we're going to have clean air for ourselves, clean environment for our children, and we're also going to be dealing with climate change in a real actionable way. We're going to be seeing people say, okay, you know what? We're now seeing this technology put to work in a good way such that we all benefit from it. That's the plan that I want to do for climate change.
Thanks, Frank. And we'll go to our third question before we go to the attendees. You have been the only candidate so far who's come out with a plan to reform of government. You've been speaking about empowering members of parliament, finding ways for parties to work together in a more bipartisan way as well, which is interesting because it hadn't come up from other candidates. Can you explain the plan that you issued a few days ago, which as I said, was injecting something brand new into the Liberal Party campaign? How would it work?
So it's quite a broad plan. What happened is when I was a member of parliament, I could see that the place was not working. So I worked in a multi-partisan way. I'm not a highly partisan person. I have respect for all my colleagues. And I might tell you that when I left, I got a standing ovation from the whole house, not just our side of the house, the whole house, because people knew that I was respectful and I was looking to do what's right for Canadians. Now, what's happened is that our system has been perverted over the years. So I was working with Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, and Green Party to say, how can we make it better? How can we put it back to work for Canadians? And that meant taking powers from the Prime Minister, giving some to the Speaker of the House, giving some to the members. So the Speaker's job is to decide who speaks. That's how it works in the Westminster system. Everywhere in the world except Canada, where the party leaders have decided we're in charge and we decide who speaks. That's wrong. He has to get his, or she has to get her powers back. The members of parliament are what we call representatives. So their job is to represent their constituents when they come to Ottawa. A good example of that is there was a Bill 96, which was hurting a lot of the Anglophone community in Quebec. And I knew many members of parliament wanted to stand up and say something about it, but they were all had their arms twisted. And to his credit, Mr. Anthony Housefather was the only MP that said, I'm going to stand up, and he was punished by the party. They took away his parliamentary secretary position and all this. This is wrong. He was doing nothing wrong but standing up for his constituents and being the voice of his constituents as their representative. So we need to take power again from the Prime Minister's office, give it back to the members of parliament. And the last thing I want to do on that front is take powers from the Prime Minister and give it back to the people. The way it works right now is we come to the people every 4 years. What do you think? You vote for me, you like me or not? But there's ways, and this is done in Australia and in the United Kingdom, where if enough people sign a petition, and there's controls to make sure it's not ridiculous or nefarious, but they can ask the parliament to debate an issue that's important to them. So I was proposing this as part of this whole package to make us, to strengthen our democracy. There's other things, I'm going to get into the weeds, very technical stuff. But one of the other things I will mention is what we call a second chamber. So imagine you're on a highway and it's blocked. I want to have a 2-lane highway. And this exists again in Australia for about 35 years, in the UK for 30 years. So these were not new ideas. I was taking the best ideas from around the world, trying to bring them back and make ourselves more effective. Now, I will mention this, Marvin. People ask me, why'd you leave? I brought this bill forward and I could see very quickly that the powers that be do not want this. The system works for them. It's not working for me, it's not working for Canadians, but it's working for them. And many people may or may not know this, but all of fall, the House of Parliament did nothing. Mr. Poilievre was so intent on having an election that he decided to use procedural methods to grind everything to a halt. No laws were passed. If you wanted something done on healthcare, nothing got done. On the economy, nothing got done. If you care about environment, nothing got done. Cost in the order of $1 million a day to run the place. And no one was working for months, but they were taking a salary. So it was, when I was there, I said, I can't go back to waste my time, but more importantly, they are wasting your money. I'm telling people this is what's happening, and I'm having an honest conversation with them. If they want someone to fix it, I'm ready to stand up, go back and make these changes to make it work for Canadians. If not, then it's fair. I'm a Democrat, but you're going to get the same old, same old. So that's what I'm proposing to people is let me go back, let me get the place working, let them say, if you're taking a salary, do your job, which is not what's been happening.
Thanks, Frank. But for clarification, our system is based on the British Westminster system, which is first past the post, and you don't need a majority of the vote. You need a plurality of the vote. Most of the former dominions of Great Britain have gone another way. You mentioned Australia, but you could easily have mentioned New Zealand and a whole bunch of other places which have gone to different type of ballot. Would your reform include either a proportional representation or preferential ballot? There was some discussion in the last term of Parliament, but it didn't lead to change because there was no consensus. So would your plan also touch the way we elect our people?
It would not, and I'll explain to you why. Proportional representation is a system that gives more power to the prime minister, because what happens is you try and get on a list, and depending on where you're on the list, if let's say you're proportional and you're going to get 15 seats, you don't want to be number 21 on the list, you want to be number 10. So what you do is you stay in Ottawa, you try and become friends with the prime minister, because if he moves you up on the list, you get elected. We don't want that. They have proportional representation systems in small geographical countries such as Israel, such as Denmark, and there they have a lot of challenges. And they're always tweaking them, because what happens is you have very small parties that get overpowered in weight because they have to constantly make coalitions. And these parties never want to compromise. Whereas in our Canadian system, we have like 3 big parties, and there's what we call blue Tories or red liberal, blue liberals, red Tories, things like that. So we come in and we have to compromise to gain power. It's a better system. And with a large country like ours, you want the member of parliament, like I talked about, representing their constituents. So at the end of the week, we all had to fly back home, talk to our constituents, hear what their complaints were, and try and work for them. Whereas if we have a proportional representation system, that goes out the window. People would never leave Ottawa. So I'm very much against the proportional representation system. I'd much rather see our MPs get to work and get the power to do their job. That's far more important to me. And as for a ranked ballot, many people say that would just always make the Liberals be there, because we'd always be everybody's second choice. I would not change the system unless, even if you only had 38% of the vote and you had most of the seats in Parliament, that's not right. I would not change any system unless there was more than 50% of the represented people of Canada in that vote. So I would have voted against our government if they attempted to do that without having truly broad support.
Thank you. That's very, very clear. We have about 8-10 minutes for open questions. This portion of the call, anyone, including the journalists who are with us this evening, can ask a question. You need to signal by lifting your hand so I can see that you want to ask a question, and I will recognize you. So if you do have something you want to say or a question you want to ask, now is the time to hit that button to raise your hand. And I do not see any hands yet. I'm going to give people a minute. Shayna Thornhill has raised her hand. Shayna, would you please ask your question?
Dory
Make
and
your
Pete.
comment. Hi.
Dory and Pete,
There's Pete.
I just have one question. How old is he?
How old is who? Mr. Baylis?
Yes.
Frank, how old are you, if you don't mind sharing?
I'm 62 years old.
How many?
62 years young, excuse me.
63?
years young.
62.
62. Okay, I'm 93, but it's one of the best speeches I've heard for a long time.
Thank you, Pete.
Well, I wish you all luck. I hope to see you do well.
Sharon Nelson, I think you raised your hand. It's your turn.
Oh,
It was me, Thornhill. I just wanted to share that I know Frank as well through the community, and I'm really grateful for the time he's taking to get out there and actually share with us his platform. Frank, thank you so much for your candor. It's so refreshing. And of all the people that are running in leadership, I think it's really important to not just say what you're going to do and talk circles around it, but to actually give concrete examples. I know I really appreciate that. And I know all the people that I've been speaking to about you appreciate it as well. So I just want to wish you the best of luck in the upcoming debates. And thank you.
Is there anybody else? Nicole Antoine, yes, we've got a couple of people. Nicole Antoine, have you raised your hand? I see a message in the chat. Oh. Sharon Nelson, do you have a question?
No, it
Marvin, I
was
think
to just
oh.
point out that Elizabeth Ciazon was raising her hand. She I
Okay.
don't maybe she couldn't find the
All right.
but
All
private
right. In
message.
that case, I'll go directly to Elizabeth Ciazon. Elizabeth?
She has to unmute.
Elizabeth, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Does it? Okay.
There you are.
Okay.
Your question, Elizabeth.
Okay. Thank you for meeting you, sir. And I like the proposal that you have the way to fix the crisis about housing for here in Canada. That's what we need the most right now because there's for homelessness. And I wish you good luck. Thank you.
Frank?
Yeah, so
Okay, that's
the housing price, the housing issue is a big issue, and it's not something that happened overnight. And
I
what's
know.
happened is that it's become a big problem, and then people say I can fix it in a day or two. You cannot. It's going to take a bit of time, but we can get out of the housing crisis. What's happened is the governments used to build what we called social housing to help people that are at the lower end of the economic order, to help people just starting up. We built social housing and we filled a role there. Now, it's been about 25 years or so that the government stopped doing that. Now we're starting to feel it. And the government also has spent too much money. And when that happens, unfortunately, it's happened throughout history, when it starts to run down, the value of your dollar, house prices shoot up. So we need to get we talked about that earlier. We need to get our fiscal house in order, and we need to start reinvesting in social housing. Those are just two of many things that we need to do. We've also doubled immigration and quadrupled the number of foreign students without thinking where are they going to live, where are they going to get housing and all that. So my parents are immigrants. My good friend and partner Chris Shaw is an immigrant. I'm the son of immigrants. Most of my aunts and uncles are, but we need intelligent control levels of immigration, which we've kind of lost, and we need to just get back to where we did it more intelligently so that we can have the right amount that we can properly integrate. So all of these things come together that need to come together for us to solve the housing crisis. It'll take a bit of time, but we can get through this, and we've done it before, and we need to just roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We're going to go to the next questioners because we have a few people now raising their hands, and we only have a few more minutes. Next person is Douglas Lloyd, followed by Errol Johnson, followed by Kenneth Ingram. So let's go to Douglas Lloyd. Douglas, you're muted. We don't hear you. We will come back to Douglas, and we're going to go to Errol Johnson. Errol?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'd just like to say something and then ask a question. I want to say that I've been a conservative since 1984 and have served on the Brian Mulroney and Mr. Harper. And I have changed my position from the party, not just me, but many conservatives, based on how we've seen the behavior of Pierre Poilievre. He's not a true Canadian. I can tell it as a fact. I know more in the background of what's happening. And he's not for this country, Canada. He's for himself and his friends. I've taken the bold move of not being a part of the Conservative Party anymore from the great and depth of the understanding that I've seen. There are several things that we must look at what is serious, that Pierre Poilievre is a carbon copy of Donald Trump, and he has already been endorsed in terms of making Canada the 51st state of the United States. These are serious issues. He is actually a friend of Elon Musk, who has raised his hand with the Hitler sign when Trump won the election. These things are very serious because we know what those kind of things means, not just for Jewish people, but for Black people and other minorities. We're in a very serious political state. And
thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your comments. We're going to keep all the questions really short because we don't have much time. Mr. Baylis, do you have a comment in response?
No, I would agree with Errol that this is an important election, because what Mr. Poilievre is not your regular conservative. He's attacking things like CBC Canada, Radio Canada. He wants to close these things down. He wants to really go after our cultural institutions at a very time that we need to be strengthening them, and the very time we need to be, how do I say, reacting to the attacks and the denigration we're getting from the Americans. We need to be strengthening ourselves, not weakening ourselves. And we also need to stop him running down our country. I'm quite tired of that, to be honest.
Thank you, Frank. We'll go to Kenneth Ingram. Kenneth, brief question, please.
Yeah, thank you for your time. It's not so much a brief question, Marvin, but an important comment in that these town hall meetings are very important, but the most important thing from these town hall meetings that each and every one of us on this video tonight needs to make sure that we vote on March the 9th to help Frank in his quest to be the future Prime Minister of Canada, to make change, positive change for each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. I want to stress again, this is a nonpartisan call. Our organization has invited all candidates, and it's possible we'll do some other town halls between now and March the 9th. For transparency purposes, everyone knows I've worked with Frank in the past when he was an MP, and continue to work with him. But our organization is resolutely nonpartisan, and there are people on this call who are not members. There are people on this call who are not liberals. It's a town hall to get to know the individual. But however, we note your strong support for Frank Baylis. We're now going to go to someone called Douggies, Doggies. It's your turn to ask a question or make a quick comment. Douggies, it's your turn.
Yes, good night. Thank you, Mr. Rotrand, and good night to Mr. Baylis. I'm from the Caribbean, Grenada precisely. And what I've noticed is that Caribbean people don't take a lot of interest in the election processes, like the voting particularly. There is a large Caribbean community. I'm talking all the islands, none left out. They're just not fully involved. So you, Mr. Baylis, what would you do because that would be a good voting bloc if you become Prime Minister or if you become the leader of the Liberal Party. So what would you do to engage this constituent? And I'm not talking Montreal, I'm talking like all over Canada. What would you do to engage this constituent, get them involved in the political process, and maybe assist yourself in some way reaching to the higher heights?
Thank you.
That's my question.
Mr. Baylis, your response?
Look, it's an excellent question, because what we're seeing, not just with the Caribbean community, but with many communities, there's a disengagement, that disenfranchisement, and people say, what do I need to vote for? I have no interest. So remember when I talked about taking power from the Prime Minister and giving it back to the people, letting them push something if they care about some issue greatly, and they can get enough signatures, 75,000 signatures on a petition, they can make this thing debated in the House of Commons. So I want to do it for the Caribbean community, absolutely, but for all communities. I want to get, especially young people too, that are really disenfranchised. Obviously, for the Caribbean community, it's close to my heart. My mother's from Barbados. I have family members on this call, and I have a large family across the country. And I want to get everybody engaged in voting. I think the Caribbean community brings a lot to the table. There's a uniqueness to the Caribbeans that have brought up, and they're small island countries, but they bring a lot to the table. I'll give you an example of the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, very small country, but her voice is heard around the world when she speaks. It's extremely incredible that such a small country has such a powerful voice. So I've seen that, and I'd like to encourage more of it.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. I'm going to close the list. There's 5 or 6 more people. I'm going to hear them, and then we're going to call for the final comments and close the call. The next is a question for Zensa Media. It reads, "Hi, Frank. I would like to ask you about how you will handle systemic racism, especially in Quebec, where it is rampant for our media industry." How would you answer that? I presume that's a question dealing with Bills 21 and 96.
So whether people know or not, I have been co-president to No to Bill 21. I have been raising money to help the court cases as they go now to the Supreme Court of Canada. I have worked with the people fighting Bill 96 and there are institutional barriers. Absolutely. I know you're speaking specifically about the cultural communities. So what's happened is that presently things like SODEC or Telefilm in Quebec and that they only see the white French person as that for them, that's Quebec. And if it doesn't fit in that box, they don't get funding. They haven't opened the doors to all kinds of different filmmakers. I see my friend Jimmy Chan is an amazing filmmaker on the call too. And they have not encouraged this amazing talent pool that we're not taking benefit of. So I would absolutely make changes to the business that's under the Canadian government control, which is Telefilm. But I would also be advocating very strongly for SODEC to open up and put more money aside for racialized filmmakers, racialized talent, because I really think it tells wonderful stories about Quebec. So we need to do that, absolutely.
Thank you. We're going to go to our next person, will be Jimmy Chan. Mr. Chan?
I think I think overall the all the conversation that we all sharing the same dialogues that we need a special leader in our heart, in our place that will will not just only gearing up what we need as Canadian. I think most important thing is for our next generations. Like I remember this the first conversation that we have which is I heard that and that's it. This is what I want. I think this is what all the Canadians want: clean air, clean water, clean earth, and no more hate. Congratulations, Frank. You have answered all the prayers and vision to make what Canadians stand for, and we are proud we're gonna have them all. This is more value than anything else in life. Thank you, Frank.
Your comments, Mr. Baylis?
Well, like I was mentioning just before, and it's funny, Jimmy came on as the next speaker, but Jimmy's done amazing work in the Chinese community. I've known Jimmy for years. He's a leader in the Chinese community. He's a person that's fought to protect Chinatown. That's a great example of a richness that belongs to Quebec, belongs to Montrealers, but it's not in the classic box of the culture that they would see it. But for me, the work that he's done, and I enjoy going to Chinatown. I know many people enjoy going there, being in the restaurants, the cultural communities and that. So I congratulate him and I want to help him do more what he's doing, not just for Chinatown, Chinese people, but for all our different communities here in Montreal, in Quebec, for that matter.
Thank you for all your support and all the times. You always been there for the communities, and this is fantastic. This is what Canadians want. You're always there for them. You're always there to listen, and people like to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chan. There's a written question from Nicole Antoine. My question: how will your government move beyond symbolic reconciliation and ensure the economic, political, and land sovereignty for Indigenous nations while addressing systemic inequalities in health, education, and environmental justice?
So a lot of people have criticized the Prime Minister Trudeau for work that he's done or not done. I actually think when it comes to the Indigenous file, he's put a lot of work and effort behind that. He's really worked very hard. He's done tremendous work in recognition, reconciliation. Is the work finished? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But what I would be doing is carrying on his legacy there. And I know, look, some people criticize him and is he perfect? No, but I think on this front, he's done a lot. For example, the boiled water advisories have gone down tremendously under his watch. Has he eradicated all of them? No. Does that mean we have more work to do? Absolutely. But I take a lot from him on that, and I congratulate him, and I would continue his legacy in that vein. And I would also tell people that these are issues that are decades, centuries in the making. So we can't expect one government one day just to make this change overnight. It's going to be a process, but we're on the right path, and I just think we need to keep driving down that path.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. Next person is Jewel Jones. Jewel, please take the floor. You'll have to unmute, Jewel. We cannot hear you.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Joel Jones. I'm second vice president for Barbados House and a fellow Barbadian. And my interest has always been with seniors. And as we realize the seniors are living a lot longer than before, what my concerns are how are we gonna organize the healthcare system in terms of helping more seniors at home, living at home, and giving them more hours of care. Right now, they're getting 3 hours, and those 3 hours doesn't really last too long. And I'm wondering, how are we going to handle the healthcare system in terms of helping seniors to keep them in their homes as long as possible? Thank you.
Frank?
That's a great question, Jules. I'm glad you asked it, because people may or may not know this, but like if we can keep someone in their home, it costs society this much. If they have to be in a long-term care, it goes up, and if they have to be in a hospital, it goes up more. So just for even it's the right thing to do for the patient, it's actually the best thing to do for society financially. So when we talked about having the best healthcare system in the world, one of the things is people want to be in their homes. It costs society less overall, and we need to help them more to be in their homes. And I think that's what Jules is touching upon there, is that this is what I call small investments for big payback. Whereas if we let these people get very sick, and then guess what? We have to bring them to the hospital. We're going to pay through the nose. So it's much better off if we help them stay in their homes, if we invest a little bit more to help them be there and be healthy there as much as possible. Society wins, the patient wins, the family wins. So these are examples when I talked about continuous care, when I was talking about the change where it was before it was just chronic care. You know, you got hit by a car, the system came, fixed you up, sent you back home again. But now, as Joel has pointed out, our population is aging. We have these people that want to stay in their homes, and we haven't thought out how we should do that. So if we don't help them, they end up in the hospital, and we end up paying way more anyway. So it makes total sense to invest in that, and that's something I will be adding as part of this whole plan of making ourselves have the best healthcare system in the world.
Thank you,
Thank
Frank.
you.
The next question and last question goes to Akil Alain. Akil?
Thank you, Mr. Rotrand and Mr. Baylis. I do want to, I'm curious about how, in particular, in detail, you would be able to change the way that the bureaucracy and the political process function in Ottawa. Just, you often hear about sort of this whole Mr. Smith goes to Washington type of paradigm where, you know, sort of very earnest, passionate, reformist politicians here in Canada, the States, elsewhere say, you know, elect me and I'm going to go to the Capitol and change the way things work. Barack Obama used to say that, and politicians usually say that heading into positions of power. But often it bogs down in a whole lot of realities of bureaucracy and politics that sort of sap the efforts at reform. So what are some of the obstacles to the kinds of changes that you would like to make to government and how it functions? And how would you tackle those obstacles?
Well, so first of all, you're bang on, sense Akil. Look, I went to Ottawa one time already, and I tried to make the changes, and quite frankly, I wasn't able to get them through. Then I realized, okay, I need to take a step back, and if I want to make these changes, I need a mandate from the people to do it. I didn't have that mandate. I got there and I said, look, we need to change the way things are done. But I saw very quickly, I'll give you an example, like Mr. Pierre Poilievre. He has been elected for, he graduates from university, he moves to Ottawa, works for 2 years for an MP, and then he gets himself elected. He's been elected 21 years. He's bought his house. He's raised his family. The minute he walks out, he's not even 50. The minute he walks out, he has a pension of over $200,000 a year with cost of living. and he's this close to being prime minister. You know what? He loves the system. So if I go there and say, I want to change the system, he's going to say, I don't want to change a darn thing. It's working beautifully for me. That's what he's going to say. It's not working for Frank Baylis. It's not working for us. So you're right. It's not going to be an easy task. It's not going to be a given task because there's this rigidity and they don't want to change. And I'm going to make them change, but I need a mandate to make it happen, first of all. Now, with respect to the bureaucracy, people attack the bureaucracy and saying they're bad people or they're not lazy. I don't agree with that at all. We need to give them the tools. We need to now say to them, look, we live in the, this is 2025. We have all this technology that's available. Let's put it to work for Canadians. And we can do that. It's absolutely doable. I'm an engineer by training, so a lot of what I've done is what we call change management. And that's what you're alluding to, is to say it's easy to say, it's much harder to do. My partner and I, what we've done through the years, and we've had great success at it, is looking at how a doctor does an operation and saying, okay, we understand that's how you train. We understand that's how it was done in the past, but then we've invented a new tool and a new way to do it. And then we need to train you to do it and all that. So it's not just to invent it, the tool. It's not just, you got the tool, the way, and then implement it. So I've done that my whole career. It's not, to your point though, it's not a given. It's not going to be easy. And there's always going to be what we call change resistors. People, I don't want to change. I've done this way the rest of my life and I want to retire, never changing. So it's not going to be easy, but on the same token, we're ready for that. And what I tend to do, as I mentioned a few times, I look at what people are doing around the world. So for example, the most advanced country for running this type of government is Estonia, because they went computerized when they became a country after the Soviet Union broke up. So we go there, learn what they're doing, learn the mistakes they made, and then we avoid them, and we can really modernize our government in this way. But I don't want to underplay it, as you point out. There will be resistance, but I've dealt with that before.
Thank you, Frank. There were a lot of comments in the chat, and I'll try to furnish that to you and your campaign, so you might be able to address some on the backside, because some might be questions rather than just comments. But there was one in particular that I skipped over, but I'm going to mention to you, because I think it's a very pertinent question. If you don't win the leadership, how are you going to remain engaged in the political process? There are people in the chat who said, you have a lot to say, interesting to hear you. But I think it's a legitimate question to ask, if in the case that you do not win, what are your plans and how are you going to stay engaged?
So I do plan to win. I know that my challenge is to get myself more known. So I do a lot of these talks like that, but that's my challenge. If I don't win, I've always been a Liberal for the last 48 years, and I will continue to contribute. So for those 48 years, I happen to be a member of Parliament, but there's many ways you can contribute. I am part of this group. Well, I stepped down formally, temporary leave of absence, because we didn't want to politicize the group, but I'm engaged in groups like this with Marvin Rotran and many other things to really support the work in the community. And I'll support if I'm not chosen as leader, I think the others are fine candidates, and I'll be happy to support them in whatever way they want me to support them or not. So I would just have to, if I'm not the leader, I have to see what the leader says,
Thank you, Frank. I'd like to thank everybody who took part in tonight's town hall. A lot of interesting questions on a lot of very different topics, and hopefully those who participate know Frank Baylis as a candidate better. They can make a choice if they're Liberal Party members, whether they're going to vote for him or not. But now you have more of an input about Frank. For those who aren't Liberals or aren't members, you know the individual who might be our next Prime Minister. And who has told you that if he isn't, he's still going to be engaged on the scene. J'aimerais remercier tout le monde qui a assisté ce soir et qui a posé des questions, a enrichi notre débat. J'espère que vous connaissez Frank Baylis mieux qu'avant. Si vous êtes membre du Parti libéral, vous pouvez faire un choix plus éclairci. Si vous n'êtes pas membre du Parti libéral ou un appuyant, vous connaissez la personne qui pourrait être notre prochaine première ministre mieux et éclaircir les choses pour vous. So everybody, I'm going to call this event closed. I thank you once again for being here. For the Baylis campaign, we will furnish the video as soon as it's available to us so that you can use the portions that you want. And in closing, I want to note that 4 members of the United Against Hate Canada Executive, Gemma Rayburn, Ellie Israel, Minda Mazzoni, and Norberto Jr. Mandin were on the call tonight. I especially thank Mr. Mandin for his aid with the technical portion of this call. Mr. Baylis, Le mot de la fin, c'est vous. You can close the meeting with a moment of
Merci tout le
song.
monde. Thank you all. I appreciate you being here and I appreciate the great questions. And thank you, Marvin, for all the great work that you do and for putting this together. Thank you. Much
Thank you,
appreciated.
everybody. Have a good evening.